Every extra word you say after making your point is respect walking out the door. Most guys don't realize they're handing over their authority one unnecessary sentence at a time. You're in a work meeting. Someone questions your proposal, and instead of a simple "I stand by it," you launch into this whole dissertation about your research process, your years of experience, how you considered all the alternatives. By the time you finish explaining why you're right, everyone's decided you're probably wrong. There's something about a man who feels the need to defend every position that makes people question whether that position is worth defending. Watch how the room changes when someone over-explains. It's like watching respect evaporate in real time. How often do you walk away from conversations wishing you'd said less? Here's what's actually happening when you can't stop talking. You're not demonstrating knowledge or building credibility. You're broadcasting insecurity to everyone in earshot. Every additional sentence beyond what's necessary is you trying to convince people of something you should already be convinced of yourself. When you feel compelled to justify your decisions, explain your reasoning, defend your choices, you're essentially telling the world that you don't trust your own judgment. And if you don't trust it, why the hell should anyone else? The psychology runs deeper than most men want to acknowledge. We live in this culture that's convinced us more information equals better communication. That's complete garbage. More information usually creates more confusion and definitely generates less respect. Think about the men you actually respect. Your boss who gets things done, that friend whose opinion carries weight, the mentor who changed your trajectory. They don't waste words. When they speak, it matters because they don't dilute their message with unnecessary explanations. They understand something most guys miss. Authority doesn't require a user manual. This connects to something ancient about how respect actually works. Marcus Aurelius, the guy who ran an empire while dealing with constant challenges to his authority, wrote extensively about the power of measured words. He understood that a leader's strength isn't demonstrated through lengthy speeches. It's demonstrated through decisive action and careful word choice. Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break, he wrote. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest. Notice he didn't say the rock explains to the waves why it's solid. It just is solid. Abraham Lincoln got this too. The Gettysburg Address, arguably the most powerful speech in American history, was 272 words. 2 minutes and 72 words, while the featured speaker before him droned on for 2 hours about the same topic. Guess which one people remember? Lincoln didn't feel the need to explain why the Civil War mattered, didn't justify his position on slavery, didn't provide historical context for his decisions. He stated his truth clearly and let it stand. That's the difference between someone who commands respect and someone begging for it. But here's where it gets uncomfortable for most guys. The compulsion to over-explain isn't really about communication. It's about validation. You're not trying to inform people. You're trying to be liked. You're not clarifying your position. You're asking for permission to have that position. And that desperation bleeds through every unnecessary word. When you explain why you made a decision, you're essentially inviting others to judge whether that decision was correct. When you justify your choices, you're positioning yourself as someone whose choices require justification. When you elaborate beyond what's asked, you're signaling that your initial response wasn't sufficient. This creates a vicious cycle that most men never escape. The more you explain yourself, the less credible you become. The less credible you appear, the more you feel like you need to explain. It's psychological quicksand. The harder you struggle to prove yourself through words, the deeper you sink into irrelevance. People start mentally checking out when you begin talking, not because your ideas lack merit, but because you've trained them to expect a novel every time you open your mouth. Consider job interviews, where this pattern becomes crystal clear. The candidates who get hired aren't the ones who give the longest, most detailed answers. They're the ones who give the most precise answers. Why should we hire you? The weak response goes on for 5 minutes about background, experience, passion, commitment, and company research. The strong response is, because I solve problems others can't. Period. Full stop. If they want details, they'll ask follow-up questions. But don't volunteer your entire professional biography when they ask for one reason. The same dynamic plays out in relationships. When your girlfriend asks why you were late, and you launch into traffic patterns, unexpected phone calls, construction delays, and the complex series of events that led to your tardiness, you're not being helpful, you're being defensive. "I got held up" is a complete answer. If she wants more information, she'll ask. But most of the time, she just wants acknowledgement that you understand time matters to her. Your novel-length explanation suggests you think she's too stupid to accept a simple answer, or that you're so insecure about being late that you need to build an airtight case for why it wasn't your fault. Here's the part that really stings. Every time you over-explain something, you're teaching people that your initial statements can't be trusted. You're conditioning them to wait for the real answer that comes after all the throat-clearing and context setting. You're systematically training everyone around you to discount the first thing you say because they know there's always more coming. That's not building credibility. That's destroying it, methodically, conversation by conversation. Most guys have no idea they're doing this. They think they're being thorough, helpful, transparent. They believe all that additional context makes them more trustworthy. It doesn't. It makes them exhausting. It signals to everyone around them that this person doesn't believe in their own words strongly enough to let them stand alone. And if you don't believe in your words, why should anyone else? The men who command real respect understand something crucial. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the presence of confidence. When you can state your position without a supporting essay, you're telling the world you believe what you're saying. When you can make a decision without explaining your decision-making process, you're demonstrating leadership. When you can be wrong without providing a detailed analysis of how you arrived at being wrong, you're showing emotional maturity. These aren't just communication techniques. They're displays of inner strength. So what happens if you don't change this pattern? Simple. You become the guy everyone learns to manage instead of the guy they come to for answers. You turn into background noise. The person who always has something to say, but never says anything that actually matters. Your opinions carry less weight because people know they come with a dissertation attached. Your decisions get questioned more frequently because you've established that you question them yourself. Your authority erodes because real authority doesn't require constant explanation. In professional settings, you become the person whose contributions make meetings longer without making them better. Colleagues start getting that glazed look when you begin speaking, not because your ideas are wrong, but because they know you're about to turn a 2-minute point into a 10-minute presentation. You get passed over for leadership roles because leaders need to communicate efficiently, and you've demonstrated that efficiency isn't your strong suit. Worse, you become the guy others have to summarize because you can't get to the point yourself. Your personal relationships suffer in different but equally damaging ways. Friends start cutting you off mid-sentence because they've learned your stories don't have natural ending points. Family members develop that patient, slightly glazed expression they wear when you're explaining something everyone already understood 3 sentences ago. Dating becomes significantly harder because confidence is attractive and over-explanation is the antithesis of confidence. Women can detect insecurity from across a room, and nothing broadcasts insecurity quite like the compulsion to justify everything you do or think. The devastating reality is that people respect brevity precisely because it demonstrates self-assurance. When you can state your position without providing a bibliography, you're showing the world you have conviction. When you can disagree without explaining why everyone else is wrong, you're displaying emotional intelligence. When you can admit mistakes without analyzing the complex chain of events that led to those mistakes, you're demonstrating maturity. But most guys are so terrified of being misunderstood that they bury their actual message under layers of context and qualification. Think about how this plays out in arguments. The guy who says, "I don't agree," and stops talking has more power in that moment than the guy who says, "I don't agree because," and then provides 17 reasons why. The first guy owns his position. The second guy is trying to convince you his position is valid, which immediately suggests he's not entirely convinced himself. People instinctively respect the first approach more, even when the second approach might be technically more informative. Here's what you're going to do instead. First, implement what I call the 7-second pause. Before you respond to any question, any challenge, any request for your opinion, count to 7 in your head. Not because you need time to think. You probably already know what you want to say. You need time to edit. Most of your best responses are your first responses, stripped of all the qualifying statements and additional context you want to pile on top. 7 seconds gives you time to catch yourself before you start explaining why you think what you think. Second, adopt the single statement protocol. 1 declarative sentence per point. I don't think that's going to work. Full stop. End of statement. Not I don't think that's going to work, because in my experience with similar projects, we usually see these kinds of challenges, and based on what I know about our resources, just the statement. If they want elaboration, they'll ask specific questions. If they don't ask, they didn't need the elaboration. You'll be amazed how often people simply accept your initial assessment when you're not frantically trying to convince them to accept it. Third, eliminate the word because from casual conversations. This one's harder than it sounds, because is where all your insecurity lives. I can't make it because. I disagree because. I think we should try this because. Cut the because. I can't make it. I disagree. I think we should try this. Let the strength of your conviction carry the statement, instead of propping it up with justifications that nobody asked for. Fourth, practice what I call the relevance filter. Before you add any information to what you've already said, Ask yourself one question. Will this additional information change the outcome? Or am I just trying to manage my own anxiety? Most of the extra stuff you want to say is anxiety management disguised as communication. You're not helping them understand better. You're helping yourself feel better about potentially being misunderstood. That's not their problem to solve. It's yours. When you start applying these principles consistently, something interesting happens to the dynamic around you. Your words begin to carry more weight because there are fewer of them to dilute the message. People listen more carefully when you speak because they know you don't waste their time with unnecessary information. Your opinions become more valuable because they're not buried under layers of qualification and context. You start sounding like someone who knows what he's talking about, instead of someone trying to convince himself he knows what he's talking about. The transformation is subtle but powerful. Conversations become more efficient because you're not filling every moment of silence with additional explanation. Decisions get made faster because you're not second-guessing yourself out loud. People start asking for your opinion more often because they know you'll give them a direct answer instead of a lecture. The respect you were trying to earn through explanation starts flowing naturally from your demonstrated confidence. You'll notice that silence becomes comfortable instead of something that needs to be filled. When someone asks you a question and you pause before answering, that pause communicates thoughtfulness, not uncertainty. When you make a statement and don't immediately elaborate, people assume you're confident in that statement rather than assuming you don't have more to say. The entire energy around your communication shifts from desperate and defending to calm and assured. There's a paradox here that most men miss. The less you say, the more people hear. The fewer words you use, the more impact each word carries. The less you explain yourself, the more people trust your judgment. It's counterintuitive until you realize that confidence doesn't require explanation. It requires conviction. And conviction is something you either have or you don't. You can't talk your way into having it, but you can definitely talk your way out of displaying it. You already know this intuitively. Think about the most respected men in your life. They're not the ones who give you the longest explanations. They're the ones whose short statements carry the most weight. They've learned something that took me years to understand. Respect follows clarity. Clarity comes from precision, and precision requires the discipline to stop talking when you've made your point. The respect you've been chasing through explanation has been waiting for you in silence all along. You just have to be confident enough to claim it. Look, you can keep explaining yourself into irrelevance. Or you can learn that the most powerful thing you can say sometimes is nothing at all. Your choice. But understand that every word beyond what's necessary is credibility you're giving away for free, and respect you're never getting back. What's it going to be? Are you ready to let your actions speak louder than your explanations? Or are you going to keep talking yourself out of the respect you're trying to earn? If this resonates with where you are right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the insights that'll actually make a difference in how people see you and respond to you. And make sure you check out the next video that comes up. It's going to challenge how you think about something you do every single day without even realizing it. Until next time, and I'll see you in the next video.